back to our study this week called Once Alienated, Now Reconciled. I'm going to have a tough time saying that lots of times, but that's how it is. That's why I called it Once Alienated, Now Reconciled. And that's the quote from the passage we're looking at in Colossians 1:21 through 23. Now today we're looking at verse 21, which I have labeled the past reality. The past reality is that we were once alienated. This first part of the sentence describes why reconciliation is necessary. Paul describes what the Colossians were before they came to faith in Jesus. The first descriptor is that they were alienated from God. This word can be translated as alienated, estranged, or excluded from God. It means to be shut out from one's fellowship and intimacy. This word fits beautifully with Paul's doctrine. Notice that he doesn't say that he didn't know God. That would be contradictory to what Paul says in Romans 1:19, for example. What can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. Everyone knows God. The problem is that they are estranged from him. They are not in fellowship with him. Now this is the picture we find in the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve are hiding with fig leaves on their bodies. They were alienated from God. Before, they used to walk without shame before him. So Paul uses this same word in Ephesians 2:12, where he describes the Gentiles as being alienated from the commonwealth of Israel. They knew Israel. They knew about Israel. They knew Israelis. But they were not in fellowship with them. There was that dividing wall of hostility. Paul also uses the word about unbelievers who are alienated from the life of God in Ephesians 4:18. Their hard hearts have made them ignorant, and therefore they do not have fellowship or intimate knowledge of the life that God provides. They are strangers to life. And so Colossians and us, we were once all alienated from God. We were estranged. We were excluded from knowledge of God. We knew him. We knew he was there, but we didn't have that fellowship. We didn't have the intimacy of knowing him in that way. The second thing that Paul says is that we were hostile in mind. Not only were we on the outs with God, but we were hostile toward God. Most often this word is translated enemy. Some translations say enemies in mind. This hostility or enemy implies irreconcilable hostility or personal hatred bent on inflicting harm. All humanity that is not saved is an enemy in mind toward God. It's not just, oh, I dislike God or God annoys me. It's, I hate God, and if I could kill him, I would. My wife and I recently watched a debate between Jeff Durbin and James White versus two atheists. It was clear that the atheists both were hostile in their minds toward God. So angry, so so hostile. It was crazy. It was clear that they were both hostile. Well, one was more socially cordial than the other, but both were openly blasphemous and mocking God. They could not cover the fact that though they said they didn't believe God existed, they had enormous rage toward this apparently not existing God. Now, if you go back to the parallel passage in Ephesians 4:18, that sentence begins with that the Gentiles, the unbelievers, are darkened in their understanding. That's the same word here. They have darkened minds. They have hostile minds. The word translated mind has to do with rational thought or critical thinking. So it's not just feelings or emotions. They, in their minds, have used their reasoning and rationality to try to kill God with their own mind. If you go back to Romans 1, in the list of descriptors of unsaved people, Paul lists haters of God. They are hostile in mind. They have tried to kill God with their own minds. People are haters. But this is exactly what Jesus said. You can't serve two masters, he said. You will hate the one and love the other. That's all you got. The word is hate. Often we tell kids not to use the word hate because it's too strong. This is exactly the right word here. This is the correct usage. People hate God with a capital H. They're hostile in mind. They want God dead. So whatever they say, whether they believe him, quote unquote, or not, really they do believe in him. They just want him dead. And so they will pretend that he doesn't exist. And that way you're very hostile to God. I mean, if you pretend that someone doesn't exist and the evidence of them is all around you, then that's a pretty good sign that you're an enemy, that you're hostile towards that person. Now, the last one is we did evil deeds. That leads us to actions, right? Because this alienation and hatred of God leads to evil actions. Really, alienation, which is kind of a state of a relationship. The hostile mind is a mental idea, and then here we have the idea of action. So alienation, hatred of God lead to evil actions. So just like the renewing of our minds leads to holy living, to loving God, alienation and hostile minds lead to wickedness. Those that are enemies of God and that want to harm God will do things that are offense to him. Paul will dive more into this when we get into the more practical section of this letter in chapter 3. He'll spend some time talking about putting on things of God and putting off these evil deeds. He calls these deeds earthly, which covers everything you do before becoming a Christian. And in chapter 3, when we get there, we will see that he gives us some broad examples of what these deeds are. The mind is set up, it's set upon, it's trained upon the things above this earth. That's what Christians do. The earthly evil deeds are to be publicly executed. They're to be killed. They're to die. This is the state that the Colossians and all the humans were in before what happened in the next clause of the second occurrence. So they want, they're doing their lethal they're doing their lethal deeds. Yeah, they're lethal, all right, but they're earthly evil deeds. They'll do them out in the open, publicly supporting other people doing that. Their mind is set upon, trained upon the things of this earth and not the things above, which they were supposed to do. So that's the end of verse 21, which is only the beginning of the sentence, because it's just one sentence we're looking at. And so next time we'll look at the next part of the sentence in verse 22.